database ready. Okay, just going through the agenda today, and before I get stuck into the agenda, if anybody has any questions or any audio or video issues during the session, please do not hesitate to use the questions panel in the webinar page. Okay, so I do have an assistant with me today who's going to help me with any questions that I might miss whilst I'm going through the session. So what I do ask is that if you have any questions at all during the session, please do not hesitate to ask those, and I'll be more than happy to answer those where I can. If there are any questions that we are unable to answer whilst we are online today, then we're happy to take those offline and come back to you. Okay. At the conclusion of today's session, you'll be sent an email which will contain the links to download today's recording. Okay, so that you can, if you wish, you can play that back and go through the relevant topics that we went through today. Okay, so again, any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Please don't leave them to the end. If you have any questions in relation to the topic that I'm currently on, ask away. Okay. So with the agenda today, we're going to be talking about changes to the activity statements. Obviously, we're going to discuss what has changed from an ATO perspective, what hasn't changed, and from an IE or P. So you probably heard that terminology being thrown around lately, and that is the receiving activity statements in an IE or P fashion, and what it all means. What challenges some of the practices today are facing in relation to electronic activity statements. So how do I know what I need to lodge? How should I lodge, and why is it important? What options do I have for client-prepared activity statements? And we'll go through and discuss some of those options as well. When can I expect the activity statements? And that's a very common question, both from clients and accounting practices, around when you are expected to receive those statements. We're going to discuss process and the ATO reports. What, where, and how. So what reports can I get from the ATO to assist me as a practice? Where do I get them from? And how do I request these reports? Okay. And obviously, we'll go through some examples of how you can request these reports from the ATO and what the process involved is around that as well. Continuing on from that, we'll be talking about the database maintenance area, so talking about duplicate TFNs and ABNs, which is quite common across databases today. So, and how do we find those and how do we deal with those? Missing or invalid TFN or ABN details. Okay, we'll show you some processes around how we find clients that have a missing or an invalid TFN or ABN and what we can do with those. Setting up some new attributes to assist with reporting. So I'll show you some examples of what attributes we can set up within practice management and how we can use those to assist us in reporting as well. We'll be talking about some practice IQ reports in there as well. Hints, tips and traps, talking about database maintenance, okay, lodgement methods and what methods of lodgement you can use. If you are lodging via ELS using multiple applications, there are some workarounds and what the pitfalls or traps are around that, and also the email address issue for portal clients, okay, and what that consists of and what we can do. Okay, so the first topic off the agenda is the changes to the activity statements. So what has changed? Obviously what has changed is paper statements no longer will be issued when you lodge electronically. Okay, so from 1 July 2014, once an activity statement is lodged through an electronic channel, and that is via ELS or via the ATO portal, the ATO will no longer issue paper activity statements. Now, from 1 July 2014, the ATO will continue to send paper activity statements until they receive an electronic lodgement. Okay? Once the ATO receive an electronic lodgement, the next activity statement to be generated will no longer be sent in paper. Now, that's an important point, because what that essentially is saying is that if you are currently receiving paper activity statements for your clients, and you are preparing as an agent, you are preparing those activity statements and lodging them on behalf of the client, you need to be very careful how you lodge those activity statements, okay? So essentially, in effect, what the ATO is saying here is if you are receiving them in paper form, you must lodge them in paper form. If you don't, and you decide that, you know what, it's a lot quicker to lodge them via ELS or via the portal, then what that will do is the next activity statement that is generated by the ATO will no longer be in paper. It will be in the electronic form in which you last lodged the client's activity statement. So the example is if you lodged their September quarter activity statement through the ELS system, that's how you will receive the December quarter's activity statement. It will come via ELS and it will not appear as paper any longer. Okay, so that's a very important point to realise. What has not changed? So the ATO will continue to send paper activity statements for the following form types because these cannot currently be dispatched electronically. Now these are ATO terminology, so forms Q, R, S and T, which are your annual GST report, your quarterly PAYG instalment notice, your quarterly GST instalment notice and your quarterly GST and PAYG instalment notice as well. Advanced Tax has been able to pre-fill electronic statements information. So from 2001 to 2010 returns, we were populating the data on the activity statement via the AB and AI reports. Okay, from 2011 to 2013 year returns, we were populating the data from the OM report. From 2014 onwards, which is the current release of Advanced Tax, we are populating the data from the AB and AI reports, which we'll talk about what those reports are a little bit later. Okay, Internet, electronic or paper, which essentially is I, E or P. What does it all mean? So as far as the ATO are concerned, you now receive activity statements in one of the three methods below. I is Internet, and that covers the portal, be it the tax agent or the business portal. So the ATO will send an email when the activity statement is ready for use in the portal. Okay? And there's a little warning around that, and I'll cover that a little bit later, but essentially you will receive, or the client or the agent will receive an email when the activity statement has been dropped into the ATO portal account. However, that can only occur when an email address has been registered for the client. Okay? So we've had a lot of queries around from clients and agents saying, well, clients are ringing us saying, well, they don't know when their activity statement is ready and available in their business portal account. And that would generally be because the client hasn't received an email, and that's because an email address hasn't been registered against their portal account. E obviously is electronic, and that would incorporate ELS, which is the electronic lodgement system. Okay, and that's used by tax agents for lodgements and requests. Okay. P is for paper, so that is currently the process that was up until the 30th of June 2014, where documents or activity statements are sent to you in a paper or print format. Challenges, and what are some of the challenges faced by tax agents and clients? So one of the common questions we get from agents is, how do I know which statements I'm responsible for preparing and lodging? Okay, so the activity statement client list, which is an AS report, contains a list of clients which the tax agent is responsible for lodging activity statements. Now, it's important to understand that this report contains all clients, irrespective of whether you are receiving the statements via the internet, in an electronic form, or paper. So that's whether it's method I, E or P, it's irrelevant. Okay, all clients will appear on the activity statement client list, which is known as the AS report. The outgoing business activity statement report, known as the AB, on the other hand, only contains clients where the method of receipt is set to E, that is electronic or ELS only. Okay, so there's a clear distinction there. And that would explain why some clients appear on the AS report and they're not appearing on the AB. Okay, and it could be because you are responsible as a tax agent for preparing the activity statement, but in a different format. Okay, the documents are being sent in a different format. How should I lodge activity statements and amendments? So this goes back to the issue that I raised before. If you don't wish to make or to have any changes made to the method of receipt, then it's important that you lodge the statement in the same way that it is received. Okay? For example, if the statement is received in paper form, then it must be lodged in paper form. Otherwise, if it is lodged via portal, then the next activity statement will be sent by the ATO via the portal. Okay, so that's a very important point. And I do understand that there are various reasons why agents will receive their activity statements in a paper form, be it internal processing, whatever the case may be. It's just easier to receive them in that form. And what we generally find is it's a lot easier to lodge them in an electronic form, be it ELS or via portal. So if that's the case, then you need to be aware that if you are lodging in a different fashion to the way the document is being received, then that will change the way it's being generated by the ATO the next time around. Okay? Consideration as to the lodgement method will depend on who is preparing the activity statement. If the agent is responsible for preparing the activity statement, then consider I or E. Okay? If the client is preparing the statement, then consider I or P. Okay? So there may be the instance where if the agent is preparing the statement, you would most likely find it beneficial to receive that activity statement in an electronic form. Whereas if you're a practice where the vast majority of your clients are preparing their own statement, that you might consider going I for Internet, which is the business portal, or P for paper. Okay? And in that case, if it's paper, the agent will receive the paper document potentially and then forward that to the client, or you may elect to have that paper document sent directly to the client. So what options do I have for those activity statements prepared by my client? So if the activity statement is prepared by your client, then you have two options of delivery. I, which is the ATO business or agent portal. So obviously in the case of your client, it would be the ATO business portal, or P for paper. Tax agents that prefer their clients to take up the ATO business portal method need to take into account the registration process. So around that, what that means is if you're happy, or if the client is happy to prepare their own activity statement and therefore lodge it, care needs to be taken if you as a practice are deciding to say to clients, well, we're going to opt to have the activity statement delivered to you via the internet, which is the ATO business portal. So some consideration needs to be given because it is not an easy process, or it may not be an easy process for some to register for the ATO business portal. Okay? There's a number of documents that need to be prepared. There are digital certificates that need to be dealt with. So it may not be a very easy process for your client, and that is something that you need to take into account. Okay, so paper statements, on the other hand, may be much simpler and an easier option for some clients of the practice. Okay. Obviously, in this scenario, ELS is not an option, as these statements will be forwarded directly to the tax agent. Okay, so via ELS, those statements will be sent electronically to the agent, and that's a bit of a problem because then it is very difficult for the agent then to provide the client with any documentation. Okay. Another very common question is, when can I expect the activity statement data from the ATO? So on the ATO website, okay, if you did a search for generation dates or activity statement generate date, it will come up with this particular screenshot or something looking very similar. So for those clients who are on a quarterly basis for activity statements, you'll see on the screen there that we've got the periods covered and the planned generate date and the legislative due date. Okay, so the planned generate date is the date the ATO intended to start generating the activity statement documentation, whether it be in an internet, electronic or paper form. Okay. Now the ATO have said that they expect to complete the generation of the activity statements 7 days from that planned start date or generate date. Okay. So certainly for the second quarter, by the 7th of December, okay, quarter 2 activity statements should well and truly have made their way out to the client or the practice. Okay? And obviously 7 days after the 15th of March for the 3rd quarter, so by the 21st of March, all clients or agents should have received their 3rd quarter activity statements. Okay? The legislative due date is the date in which those documents are due for lodgement. However, it does not take into account the fact that agents may obviously have an extension. Okay, so that is the earlier date in that case. So they are your quarterly activity statements. The next screenshot shows you your monthly, okay, and the expected date. So ideally 7 days from the legislative due date is when you would expect to have those activity statement documents well and truly within the office or have been received, should have been received by the client. Okay. If they don't, or if the client or the practice has not received the activity statements within the 7-day time frame from the from the planned generate date, then you would need to get in touch with the ATO. Okay, ELS lodgements from multiple systems. Now this is an interesting one. So, are you lodging by ELS using the same tax agent number with Reckon APS and another vendor product? Okay, if so, then you may have experienced the issue where the OM, AL, AB or AI reports have ended up in the wrong application. So we'll talk about those specific reports a little bit later and what they mean. But essentially what we're saying is where you have clients of the practice that you have registered them to receive the activity statement via ELS, obviously that data will be sitting in your ATO virtual mailbox for the next time that you connect it to the ATO. Now the problem will be is this, if you're connecting to the ATO and lodging to the ATO using one or more software applications, then you may encounter an issue, because what will happen is if, for example, you're using another product to connect to the ATO to lodge super funds, for example, what will happen is the moment it connects with the ATO, it will download any data that you have sitting inside your virtual mailbox. And that data may be validation reports. They can also be activity statement data from the ATO, as well as reports. So that's a problem, because essentially what that will mean is you cannot move that data from one application to another. Okay? The suggested workaround is to change the gateway or the ATO gateway in your software. So within the Reckon APS application, we recommend that you maintain your ATO primary gateway, and for your third-party vendor, we suggest that you use your ATO secondary gateway. Okay? And I'm going to show you in the application where those settings are. So if I launch Central, okay, if I scroll down to System Administration Consoles and I launch the Tax Agents module, okay, you'll notice in here that I'm presented with the tax agent details, and specifically in the left-hand navigation pane, I'm going to navigate down to the ELS setup. Now, because I am Melbourne-based, what you'll find is the CEG address is currently being selected as ATO Melbourne. Okay, so any lodgements that I make from this particular computer or environment, they will lodge with the ATO via the Melbourne office. Now we all know that from time to time there can be outages, okay, lodging through the ATO. So what the ATO have is they have a setup, a standard setup where they'll say, if your primary gateway, for example, is Melbourne, and if that gateway is down for maintenance, or it is down because of maintenance issues, or there's a problem with the gateway, the secondary gateway for Melbourne users is Brisbane. Okay, so what we're saying here is in your other application that you use to lodge, we would suggest that you change this gateway from Melbourne to Brisbane. Okay? So the ATO have set up a bit of a plan where they, I suppose, plan for outages. Okay, so if you have a primary gateway and it's Melbourne, the primary gateway of Melbourne is down, your secondary gateway becomes Brisbane. If Brisbane is also down, then your tertiary gateway becomes Adelaide. Okay, so this information is available on the ATO website, and you can obtain that quite easily. Otherwise, you can contact Reckon Support, and they'll be more than happy to provide you with information. Okay, but essentially Melbourne, Sydney, and Adelaide, if your primary gateway is one of those three, your secondary gateway becomes Brisbane. For Melbourne and Sydney primary gateway clients, your tertiary gateway becomes Adelaide. Okay. For Adelaide primary gateway clients, your secondary gateway becomes Brisbane as well. Your tertiary gateway becomes Sydney. Brisbane primary-based clients, primary gateway clients, their secondary gateway becomes Adelaide, tertiary is Sydney. Okay. Now, there are no issues in lodging tax returns through a secondary gateway. Okay. At the end of the day, they still will receive a validation report. They will still receive a transmission report, and the returns will still be processed. Okay? All that really means is if you are using a secondary gateway, then the secondary gateway does not have the ability to download your activity statement reports that the ATO sends you. Only your primary gateway has the ability to receive activity statement reports and data. Okay. Okay, so the next topic to talk about is process. So what data can I receive from the ATO, and what is available to me? There are a number of reports which I mentioned earlier that are available from the ATO that you can request. Okay? The first one is the Activity Statement Client Report, known as the AS report. So if you're ever talking to the ATO knows them as the AS report. This type of report is solicited and it is requested by the agent on a monthly basis, is our recommendation here. You do need to request this report manually. Okay, you cannot receive it automatically. Okay. Excuse me. The Activity Statement Lodgement Report, which is known as an OL report, it is what we call an unsolicited report, and it is received directly from the ATO. So you do not need to request this particular report. Okay, so any of the reports that are marked as unsolicited are automatically sent to you by the ATO. Okay. The Activity Statement Summary Report, known as an OM report, that is also sent to you directly from the ATO. Okay. The Outgoing Business Activity Statement Report, okay, that is also an unsolicited report, and it is sent to you directly from the ATO as well. Okay. And the Outgoing Instalment Activity Statement Report, it is also unsolicited and it is sent to you directly from the ATO. Now, the only thing that I can suggest to you here is it is difficult to determine when these reports are sent to you by the ATO, but essentially they are sent to you week 3 of every month or quarter. Okay, so that may change, but that's essentially what the ATO have given us as a guideline, that you'll be looking at week 3 approximately of every month. Now those dates may or may not change, but that's what we've been given as a guideline from the ATO to date. Okay. So the next question is, how do I receive these reports from the ATO? So as I said earlier, every month the ATO will send the activity statement information in an electronic report directly to your ELS mailbox. And as I said earlier, it's about week 3 of every month. So the next time you connect to the ATO ELS lodgement system using the batch processing module, we will automatically receive any data that is residing in your ELS mailbox. Okay, that was that virtual mailbox that I spoke about earlier. These files should be available within 7 days from the ATO generate date, which is what I discussed earlier. Okay, so all documents, all paperwork, and any reporting or information from the ATO around a monthly or a quarterly activity statement should be received within 7 days from the ATO generate date. Okay, if not, then you need to get in touch with the ATO directly. Now, the other thing that's happened with version 2014.4 of Tax Manager is that we utilise the AB and AI reports to populate the data in the return form. Okay, so reports AB and AI, which I'll show you shortly, do contain information about the activity statement itself. Okay? And that is the data that we will use to populate your activity statement in the Advanced Tax product, okay, in Tax Manager. Now the AB and AI reports cannot be manually requested from the ATO, and that's a problem for those sites who are using multiple applications to lodge tax returns with, okay? Because what can happen is we've seen many instances where these AB and AI reports end up in the wrong application, and essentially what that means to the practice is you are unable to automatically create your activity statements and populate the data in which you've been sent from the ATO. Okay. Okay, requesting reports from the ATO and the particular process steps. So what we need to do is each month, if there are any unsolicited reports that you wish to receive, solicited reports that you wish to receive, you need to prepare and lodge the solicited report request. Okay, and I'll show you how that's done shortly. Within 48 hours, and obviously, when you lodge that request, solicited report request, you will receive a validation report from the ATO telling you that that report has been received and accepted. Within 48 hours, you should then receive the ATO report in which you requested. Now, we're saying approximately 48 hours, however, it could be longer. Okay, we have seen some instances where it could take up to about a week or 10 days. So especially around lodgement deadline times. Okay, so if there is an ATO deadline for lodgement of activity statements or tax returns, what we generally find is in order to get to get that report back from the ATO, it generally doesn't happen within a 48-hour period. Okay, it may take up to 7 or 10 days. Okay, because there is no priority given to these requests by the ATO. What will then happen is once that report has been generated by the ATO, it will sit in your virtual mailbox, ready for the next time that you use your software to connect to the ATO and lodge. Because the first thing it does is when it connects, it looks at your mailbox and says, is there any data in there? And the answer would be yes, and your specific reports that you requested will be downloaded and available to you in the Tax Manager product. Okay. And obviously, once they're received, you can then run your reports that you need to run from within standard reporting. Okay. Now, receiving data from the ATO, where do I find the reports that I'm receiving back from the ATO? So all ATO reports such as transmission, validation, any bulletins, so bulletins would cover things like outages or issues that the ATO are currently experiencing. Client lists, the OM, OL, AB, AI, and AS reports are all available within the ELS files option under batch processing. Okay. These reports, once received, are stored in the APS_DSQL database for future reference. So once the data is received, we do store it in the database so that you can then run those reports at any point in time. So the question will be is how do I request the reports, or how do I request certain reports from the ATO? Okay. So very simply, if we launch APS, okay, we'd come down into the System Administration Console area. We would then double-click on the Tax Agents module. So the first step is let's request an activity statement client report or an AS report. Now, once the APS console loads, we're presented with the Tax Agents module. Okay, and I'll maximize that so you can see. What we need to do is we need to click on the agent details. Okay. Then what we do is we click on agent forms. Okay, because we're going to request an agent form. Now, if you are a practice that has multiple tax agents, you need to make sure that you select the appropriate tax agent in the agents window. Okay. Once you've done that, what we need to do is we need to click on the drop-down selection and select the tax year to be 2014, okay, because that is the current tax year. Okay, once the 2015 software is released, then we can change the tax year to 2015. The next option we then need to do is we need to click on the action button, and we click on the drop-down and we select create a new RR form. So what that is a report request form. okay, or document that is completed by the agent that is then lodged with the tax office, and obviously that request will contain the information that the agent requires from the ATO. Now, because we're requesting a activity statement client list, okay, we tick the box where it says request the following report. We click on the drop-down selection and we select AS, which is activity statement client list. Okay. The only thing left to do really here is we do not need to complete anything in this window here or in the unsolicited report status. Okay, what we do need to do is we need to complete the contact name details. So that may be a partner or an administrative person within the practice. That information is only ever used by the ATO if they have any questions or problems or issues generating the report that you've requested. Okay. We then click on the Add button. Okay, so what will happen is, and now because obviously I'm using a dummy tax agent number, I'm getting an error. Okay, but normally what I do is I normally click on the Add button, and what that will do is it will ensure that the request appears in the that the request appears in the batch processing list. Okay, so it's important that if the person doing the lodgements isn't actually requesting or completing this particular document, then you need to let them know. Okay, because otherwise what will happen is the moment you click Add, the document gets verified and it will automatically appear in the batch processing list. Okay, ready for lodgement. Now, if the lodgement person isn't told to lodge that request, it'll just sit there forever and a day, and you'll be waiting for a report that really has never ever been requested for. Okay. So that's how we would request an activity statement lodgement report. Okay. So some of the other things that you might also want to request is what we call that was an activity statement client list. Sorry. The other reports that you might want to request are an activity statement lodgement report. Okay, so determine whether an activity statement has been lodged or not. How do we request that particular report? The same process applies. You launch the tax agents module, you click on agent forms, you make sure the tax year is set to 2014. On the action button, create an RR request. Click on the request button. You would select an activity statement client list. The difference here is that we're asking for a slightly different report, so we need to click on the Change Unsolicited Report Status 4, and we're asking for an activity statement lodgement report, which is an OL. Okay, and all we need to do now is click on the Add button, and that will obviously add that report to the batch processing list ready to be lodged. Okay, so it is lodged as if it was a tax return. It will receive, or you will receive, a validation report telling you that the request for that report has been received and has been validated. Okay, and hopefully within 48 hours that data should come back, or that report should come back from the ATO. The other option here is if you don't wish to request an OL report, you can also request what we call an activity statement summary report. Okay, and that is done in the same way. Now, one of the things you need to be aware of is this: you can only request one report at any given time. Okay, so if you've requested an activity statement client list, you must wait 24 hours or 48 hours until that request has been fulfilled. That is, that you've received the report from the ATO before you can request another. Okay, if you try and request multiple reports from the ATO before the previous request has been fulfilled, the validation report will come back with a validation error. Okay, so you just need to keep that in mind. Okay, so that's requesting the reports. Once the report is received and it does come back from the ATO, the next question will be is how do I actually run those reports? Okay, I've just got a question, so before I move on, it is one request per agent, yes. Excuse me. So if you have multiple agents within the system, you do need to request the report for each and every agent. even though they might be joined. Okay, so you might have a primary agent with a sub-agent. That primary agent and sub-agent do have separate agent numbers, so therefore you do need to have separate requests. Now, when you're requesting an OL report, do you need to choose the AS as well? No, you don't. The AS report is different from the OL report, and I'll show you what they look like next. Okay. Okay, so let's go back into APS. Let's go back into standard reporting. So under the reporting module, under standard reporting, excuse me, this is where you'll see or be able to run the activity or statement reports that you've requested from the ATO. So once it launches, the first thing you need to remember is you must click on the selector icon and you must select Tax ATO. Okay. Under Reports and under Tax ATO, you'll notice that all these options now become available because I clicked on the selector for Tax ATO. Now, some of the reports you are able to run here are as follows. So one of the ones that I mentioned before was the activity statement client list. Okay. We have three options here. We can group it by agent, partner, or manager. I'm going to group it by agent and just take a look at the report itself. So what you'll see is you'll see a TFN and an ABN. Okay. You'll see a sort name, and that is the sort name that the system has picked up from the APS database, the client name, and the postal address. Whether the client is registered for GST or not, and how the activity statement is being received by the agent, okay, or how it's been received full stop. So where practices might ask me and say, well, how do I know which address the activity statement, which is being received in a paper format, how do I know which address it's been going to? Now, on the portal it might say, it might have a particular address, but how do I know that that it's going to a particular address? Okay, and this is how you can tell. So the address that it's mentioned here is the address that the ATO are sending that paper statement or document to. Okay. So that is an example of your activity statement client list. Okay, and received by, it's either going to be an I, an E, or a P. Okay, so you'll be able to tell how your clients are receiving their activity statements. Okay, and in this case, they're all E for electronic, which means they're received by ELS. And obviously this report can be printed, as well as there are some filters that you can implement as well. Okay, so you can use your client, your matter, or your tax filters should you so desire. So that is an example of an activity statement report. Some of the other examples might be an OL report, which is an activity statement lodgement report. Okay. So the activity statement lodgement report, obviously the first page will contain all the relevant information that appears on the report and what it means. So things like the frequency and the lodgement status. Okay. The report itself will look at the last 6 months from the date of the request, and it will come back to you and tell you whether the client has lodged or not lodged their activity statements for that quarter or month. Okay, so looking at the very first one here, A Blue Company, we can tell that they're receiving their activity statements or lodging them and receiving them on a quarterly basis. The last month was lodged, okay, less than a month was lodged, and so on and so forth. Okay. Where, for example, you've got a client that is a monthly client, okay, we can tell that the latest month has not been lodged, and to be honest, the last 2 months haven't been lodged, okay, whereas the prior 3 months and 4 months prior, as well as 5 months prior, have been lodged. Okay. So this report will only show you the last 6 months. It is not a limitation of the software. It is the only data that we are able to receive from the ATO. The other important point to make here is these reports will have a run date. Okay, so the run date will tell you the date at which this report was downloaded from the ATO. Okay. So if I'm looking at this report, I can already tell it's 1 month out of date. So the latest month really means December, not January. Okay. Okay, so that's the that is classified as the OM report. So we can, sorry, the OL report. Getting confused myself now. The OL report, which is the activity statement lodgement report, is also another report that you can run as well. The OM report is the activity statement summary report. So we've got some detail here. We can run it by agent, partner, or manager. If we group it by agent, we can see that we have the taxpayer name, the ABN or TFN, the period in which the activity statement refers to. Okay, so in this case, the December quarter. The document identification number is also presented, and also the type of return and any other data that is contained within that report that we can then use to populate the form when we create it. So for example, if we were to create the activity statement for A Blue Family Trust for the December quarter, that document ID number will populate onto the form automatically, as well as any of the available fields that the ATO have notified us. So that's G21, F1, item 7, T7, T2, and T5. Okay. And this is the report that you cannot request from the ATO. Okay. All right. So your AB report are the ones that are used to generate as well. Your AB and your AI reports are those that we use to populate the data on the return, on the activity statement itself. Okay, so it obviously contains the ABN, the period, the DIN, the due date, and any of the data that would normally appear on a printed form. Okay. So the AB is specifically for activity statements, okay, whereas the AI talks about installment activity statements. All right, and the same process appears here. Now, one of the things you need to be aware of with the AB and the AI report is that these are received on a monthly basis, okay, for your monthly and your quarterly activity statements. What's very important here that we need to talk about is your filters, okay? We have filters for the AB, AI, OM, and RS reports. Specifically, what we're talking about now is the AB and the AI report. So it's important that when you do, for example, receive the AB or AI report for the month of January, for example, that your filter has been set to look at the data that relates to the month of January, because otherwise you could be looking at old or previously received AB or AI report information. Okay. Generally, the filter is in the format of the date the report has actually been received. Okay, so in this scenario, the report date is the 4th of December 2014, and that's the date that it was last updated and received from the ATO. Okay, so obviously these reports are stored in the APS database, so they cannot be deleted. Okay, so that's important. And obviously the AB and the AI reports, as we discussed earlier, are those reports that we populate your activity statement data with. Okay. New database attributes for consideration. So, one of the things that has been raised and that we'll cover now is how do I set up, or what attributes should I consider setting up when I am I run an accounting practice and I have a number of clients where I could be preparing statements in very different fashion. You know, you might have some clients where you'll prepare the data internally. You'll have some clients where you'll know that the activity statement is actually prepared by the client themselves. And there may be the occasion where the client might say, look, you know, I might prepare the odd activity statement, but the practice might prepare or review those activity statements. So one of the things that you might consider setting up is an attribute called activity statement prepared by. Okay, so that would be your attribute, and your responses to those attributes might be as follows. So this is an example that we've come up with. So you might say client via paper, client via portal, joint via portal, not applicable, because we don't prepare an activity statement for a specific client, or tax manager, which is via ELS. Okay. Now these attributes, and I'm going to show you an example of one, would be maintained by the practice in a manual fashion. Okay. So what that essentially means is I've got BAS and IAS prepared by, and you can see the attribute there is just a drop-down selection, and that's where I would select the appropriate one. Now that attribute and the data behind that attribute is prepared manually. Okay, it's updated manually, so it does require quite a significant amount of effort and some sort of process behind the scenes to ensure that it's up to date. The advantage of those is that you can then use those reports or that information in your standard reporting fields. Okay, so in here, for example, we've got the BAS and IAS prepared by. We can actually incorporate those filters in our report. Okay, so where the activity statement is prepared by a client, holistically prepared and lodged by the client, then we may not want to include those clients on our ATO report that we generate. Okay, so that's just one example of some of the things that you can do. The other way is if you are a practice that currently has BPA in place, we can automate that process. So when the report is received from the ATO, that is the AB and the AI report, we can have basically a process that would run through the data contained in that report, and we would populate the attributes in the database accordingly based on what we see on that report that we receive from the ATO. Okay. So it might be things like, who's responsible for preparing the return? Is it the agent? Is it the client? How is the activity statement being received? So on and so forth. Okay. So how do we populate that new attribute? Again, as I mentioned earlier, you can do that manually. Otherwise, this information is contained in the activity statement client list, which is the AS report, and it's available upon request for each agent as a solicited report. Okay, so if you want to automate the updating of that data in the database using BPA, then I would suggest you ask your consultant to either create the data as a one-off population, and you would maintain that manually, or continually and automatically populate the data based on some business rules, which obviously is based on information contained in the AS report as well. Okay, database maintenance. What is very important here is when you run any of your standard reports, there is matching done between what is contained in the ATO report and what is in the APS database. Okay, so OZ file numbers in the central console is the key to matching information received from the ATO to the Reckon APS database. Okay, so for example, if you've got a report received from the ATO, be it an AB, an AI, an AS, any of those reports at all will always contain the TFN or the ABN. Okay, and that's what we use to match back to our database. So it's important for your clients to ensure that they have a tax file number entered into the system as well as an ABN if applicable. Now this is something that's very common. When you're in database maintenance, the following is shown in standard reports when data cannot be matched in the database based on a TFN or an ABN. So the no database reference found message is quite common, and I'm going to show you that in a report very shortly. The reason why you see the no database reference found, there are a number of reasons, but essentially I'm going to run a report now just so that we can actually see one and show you what it looks like. Okay, and there it is there. I'm just going to zoom that in a little bit so that you can see that very clearly. You'll notice that most of the reports that you run from a tax ATO perspective have what we call the sort name column and the client name column. The client name column comes from the ATO. The sort name is where our system, okay, where APS, Tax Manager, will match the reference numbers, that is the TFN or the ABN, that's received from the ATO to a client in the database. Now, if it doesn't find a client in the APS database with that TFN or ABN, that's what it will report, a no database reference found, because there is no match. Okay, that is the only unique identifiers that we can use, TFN or ABN. So, if that's the case in your practice, there could be a number of reasons why that could be. First reason could be that you have a duplicate TFN or ABN in the database, and it's important that you understand that those fields must be unique. Now, the most common example where I've seen duplicate TFN or ABN is where you have a trust and a trustee company. Okay, I have seen both instances of the TFN and ABN appear in both clients. Okay, so you really need to understand who essentially is the owner of that TFN or ABN and make sure that it only resides against that particular client. Invalid TFN or ABN. So I have seen instances where clients have entered the TFN or ABN into the database. The most common one is the TFN where there are spaces. Okay, so 1, 2, 3 space, 4, 5, 6 space, 7, 8, 9. That is classified as an invalid TFN, and therefore we cannot use that TFN field to match against. The partner or manager not assigned to the tax matter. Okay, so the tax matter is essentially the matter that has the tax return attached. If that matter does not have the partner or manager selected or assigned, you may see the no database reference found. Okay, also clients that do not have an agent assigned. Okay, so in the Practice Management database where you can select the appropriate agent under the auth file numbers, if you haven't selected an agent, then that's an issue. It may not appear in the report. So, TFN and ABN data integrity. Okay, and it's important we get this right before we try and run any of the reports, because otherwise all you're going to see is a lot of no database reference found. So the question is, do you have any duplicate ABN or TFN information in your database? Okay, are there any clients with missing or invalid TFN or ABN information? Are the clients you are responsible for lodging activity statements for actually in the database? Okay. And why do I see no database reference found in tax reports? So, what tools do I have available to me to isolate or determine which clients fall into that category? So one of the tools you have available to you is the Tax Data Investigator. Okay, and it's a very useful tool, and it will allow you to look for duplicate TFN and ABN as well as invalid TFN or ABN, as well as then run the other option is you can run some client or tax lists. Okay, based on attributes using partner manager or tax agent, and obviously terminated and excluding terminated clients. Now, if you are one of those sites where you have BPA, you could have a BPA alert which automatically runs through the database. Okay, scans the database, looks for these particular clients, and it can then report on those and deliver that to you in an email on an ongoing basis. Okay. If you don't have BPA, then obviously it's up to you to go through the Tax Data Investigator. Now, this tool is not a one-off tool. It's important that you run this now, and then you run it on a regular basis. Okay, so how do we run the Tax Data Investigator, and how does it work? What we do is in the Advanced Tax product, under System Administration Console, now assuming you have the rights to this, obviously, is the Tax Data Investigator. Okay, you launch the Tax Data Investigator and you're presented with the window. Okay, I'm going to maximize this screen. And what we're essentially looking for here is exactly as we spoke before. We're looking for in duplicate TFNs, duplicate ABNs, invalid TFNs, and invalid ABNs. Okay. Now what this will do is it will run through the database, okay, and perform these checks, and it will give us a report. So what we do now is these are the checks that I wish to run. I click the Next button, and you'll see that there's a summary. Okay, so there are no duplicate TFNs in the database at the moment. Then there are no invalid TFN or ABNs, but we do have a duplicate ABN, okay, because we've got the number 2. So there's 2 clients with a duplicate ABN. All we need to do is we need to double-click on that particular line, and we're presented with a report. Okay, so in this scenario, we've got the A Blue Company, Proprietary Limited, the A Blue Family Trust. They're both sharing the same ABN. I would hazard a guess that the A Blue Company is probably the trustee of the trust, and therefore in that scenario someone's gone and entered the ABN in both instances. So what needs to happen here is we need to remove the ABN ideally from the company. Okay. This report can be exported to Excel, okay, if you wish, and you can then run all your appropriate filters in Excel. Otherwise, you can use some very basic filtering here where you can drag, for example, the client partner field to the top, and you can filter by client partner, okay. So it's important that you do remember that this needs to be run on a regular basis, okay, just to make sure that your data is clean and tidy. Okay. Some of the other things that you can run from within the system are obviously PIQ tax reports. Okay, so if you are running Practice IQ, we do have a tax reporting module which will also assist you in giving you a graphical representation of some of the reports that are available. Okay, these reports can be filtered by return type, so you can actually select to display your activity statements, and the system will give you a number of returns which exist in the database, as well as the number of returns that are lodged. Okay, there are a number of filters there. You can filter by tax agent, return type, partner, manager, return status, and return responsibility. Okay, hints, tips, and traps. Database maintenance, so TFN, ABNs, they must be unique, valid, and contain no spaces. Okay, so as we just discussed, remember that the tax data investigator is there to assist you. Okay. Think carefully about the lodgement method, especially in the case of amendments. Okay, so that's a bit of a gotcha. I have seen a number of practices, receive the activity statements in paper form, lodge them in paper form. The client or the agent decides that we need to do an amendment. This is the classic gotcha where they will simply log on to the portal and do the amendment via the portal, okay? And that then creates an issue because the next activity statement will be delivered by the portal. The activity statement client list report, it is a report worth requesting and generating. It's important to check the postal addresses for accuracy and consistency, okay? Because that is, for those clients who are receiving a paper form, that is the address in which the ATO will send that document. And also check that the activity statement's receipt method, being I, P, or E, is it correct? Okay, because that may change from month to month, quarter to quarter, as lodgements are being done. Activity statements received via ELS that are prepared by the client. Okay, if you are receiving activity statements via ELS, but the activity statement is prepared by the client, you can lodge a CU form via the portal, updating the receipt method from electronic to paper. Okay. Lodging via ELS using multiple software applications, you need to consider using the primary and secondary gateway configuration. So it's important that if you're using another third-party product to prepare and lodge your superannuation funds, for example, that you set that up using the lodging via the secondary gateway. Okay. Support or the ATO can assist you in that regard. Okay, so Reckon support can certainly help there. Where the activity statement receipt method is I for Internet, check that an email address has been registered with the ATO via the ATO or the tax agent portal. Otherwise, you will not receive any advice. Now, that's a common one where we are having some clients say to us, well, my client does have the business portal. They are not receiving an email, so therefore they're constantly contacting the agent as to when the activity statement is ready. The simple solution to that is you need to log on to the ATO portal and you need to check their email address settings against their client account. Okay, so there is a section in there where you can put in the email address, and it's important that you do so that the ATO can communicate with the client directly to say your activity statement will be available in the portal as of tomorrow. For those clients preparing their own activity statements, you will need to decide on the most appropriate receipt method. These may be P for paper or I for Internet, which is the portal. Okay, and just take into account the fact that clients will need to register for a business portal account. Take into account the registration process and the maintenance of such. Okay, installing the digital certificates is not an easy process, and it may not be an easy process for some clients. It's also important then to review your current practice processes around electronic activity statements, okay, because of the bulk changes that have been made, and this is something we are still learning. Okay, so just it's worth checking what your current processes are and determining whether there are any gaps in those at all. So in summary, okay, we've spoken about the database maintenance, looking out for duplicate TFN and ABNs, as well as missing or invalid TFN or ABNs. That is a very important process, because if you don't keep your database correct, you can't expect to get good and meaningful reports. Okay. Database attributes, consider adding additional attributes to assist you with reporting, okay, which we spoke about earlier. ATO generation dates, familiarise yourself with those dates. They are available on the ATO website, just so that you know when to expect the activity statement data to become available to you or your clients. Lodging via ELS, we've spoken about that, consider setting up the primary and secondary gateway. Okay. And it's unfortunate, because the AB and ALO reports, if they are received in the wrong software product, they are stuck there, unfortunately. You cannot ask the ATO for another download. It's not possible. That concludes the session. Apologies for going over time, but I'm going to open the webinar now up to questions. If anybody has any questions at all, please fire away and use your questions panel. So I might leave it, depending on the number of questions, I might leave it open for another 3, 4, 5 minutes. Let's see how we go. It looks like some questions have been answered by my associates, so thank you. You might find that if you haven't got any questions at the moment, and you certainly think of some, that's fine. Don't hesitate to log a call with our support team. They'd be more than happy to help.
Anthony, it's Tanya here.
Yes.
Yep. Would you mind showing us just where it was that you open up batch processing to look at the reports that you requested from the tax agent to be able to lodge those?
Sure. Absolutely. Okay. So in tax management, okay, assuming you've got access to this particular module, we would launch the batch processing module. Just wait for that to load. Okay, so it's just loading now. So the important point here is to just make sure once that module launches, on the drop-down selection, if you click on the lodgement button, okay, your request or your RR, report requests, will appear in that list. Okay, so it's important to understand that if you are requesting these reports in the software, but you are not the person lodging the returns, that you let the person who is lodging the returns know that there will be an additional, or could be additional documents in there that need to be lodged. Okay, so that's where they would normally appear, and the process would be exactly the same as it is when you're lodging a return. You simply double-click on the request. It appears on the right-hand side, and you click on the next button. Okay, but that's one of the important steps that you just need to factor in, that if the person lodging the requests is the person lodging the returns, if they are the person preparing the requests, then you shouldn't have any issues. But if they're two different people, you may find that your requests aren't being lodged. Okay, and obviously your ELS files. So once the lodgement has been completed, your ELS files will give you, your drop-down here will tell you what data you may or may not have received. So for example, business activity statement, that's all the data that's been received in the last 6 or so months in relation to an AB report, okay? Or any data in relation to a activity statement client list, for example. Okay, so those dates are the dates that the electronic lodgement system has received those reports. And those reports cannot be deleted. So any other questions from the audience today? One of the things that came up today that I will raise is I have raised a question or a query with the ATO around those clients who are receiving their activity statements via the business portal. I know of a number of agents who have mentioned to me that quite a number of their clients aren't receiving the emails from the ATO, and the reason for that is obviously they don't have an email address selected or entered into the ATO portal. So the question I've had with that I've raised with the ATO is, can we run an exception report by tax agent, that will show us all those clients of the tax agent who have registered or elected to receive their activity statements via the business portal that do not have an address registered. Okay. So if that report is possible, then that may make the tax agent's life a little bit easier in terms of determining which are the clients that don't have an email address. Okay, so I've got a question around unsolicited reports. So the only report that you need to physically request from the ATO are those named as solicited. Okay. So an activity statement client list is what we call a solicited report. You need to request it on an ongoing basis. Okay. With the unsolicited reports, which is the OL, OM, AB and AI reports, they should be received by the tax agent automatically from the ATO. Now there is a big however here. Unfortunately, some practices may have been requesting or attempting to request an OL and an OM report, okay? Because you can't request an AB and an AI. Now what that can do to the ATO is as follows. If you are automatically receiving an OL, which is an activity statement lodgement report, and an activity statement summary report, which is the OM, if you suddenly request one manually, you may inadvertently be telling the ATO that this is my last request, I don't wish to receive any more. Okay, now there's no way of telling that that's the case other than to ring the ATO and ask the question, okay, because there is a flag on their system that says this client's just gone and requested an OL and an OM, it's their last request, they don't want any more of those reports being sent. Okay, so it's something you need to be careful of. So essentially unsolicited reports, you should not need to request them, they should be automatically received. The only other exception to that is as follows. I have seen some examples where clients or agents have requested a report from the ATO and they've never received it. Okay? In those circumstances they are rare, but there is apparently a flag on the ATO side of things where they can basically turn the requests off. So there's a flag on the ATO database that essentially says no matter how many requests for data or reports we get from a tax agent, do not send them anything. Okay, now that can happen. If that's the case, you will need to speak to the ATO, and I'd suggest that you need to speak to someone who's a little bit higher than the first level support. Okay, because that flag is not easily identifiable. Yeah, and if you're one of those practices where for whatever reason you're not receiving some or all of the reports from the ATO, which are the unsolicited ones, you need to speak to the ATO very, very quickly. Okay. So are there any other questions that anybody can think of? Okay, I might give it another minute or two. If there aren't any further questions, then I will end the session. Thank you very much for your attendance today. It's been great, and hopefully you'll be attending the session later on this afternoon for part 2. And just remember that you will be receiving an email from us with the links to download the presentation.